Oh, so let's keep this critical race theory going. You have options in front of you. Which ones do you choose? Okay, this is just of the abundant options today. Could be 12th graders, could be college students, could be brothers in the mill. What do they all have in common? And what is critical that you must understand about this situation? It's going to be a mathematics. The difference is math is a term, and it's like criticality. Kids doing magnets and playing around in school, in high school, makes them a 12th or a kindergartner. It's by vector positions and systems, by what the common observation. It's a fence, it's a gun. This is soldiers out there. This is the structure of the atomic model. And so you're going to have to learn this from a dual diagnosis. You will always have kids that are not born at 33 years old or the experience level of those things. There are many different divergent paths off of a standard model. What is up? What is up around here? I was talking about a subject in cancel culture, or critical theory, excuse me. Same term, but what would be the adjustment under the standard? It would need to be something that's general. It need to be something that says it's either mathematics across the whole, which again, when we go to a Zoom class of any kind, high school, mathematics, history, we watched it during COVID. We had to present this because it was critical, because you wouldn't be able to survive any other way, right? You would not get food. Pressure on the street for stress and anxieties are critical. They would be critical points, +1 or -1 or 0, neutral, into the aspect. They would be the tau, they would be the neutrino, they would be off of this there's a tau, off of this there's a neutrino, off of this there's an electron, and free radiant position of the electron shell. What is it? It's geometry. What would that geometry look like? It would look like the fucking pain train for general relativity over to the women's campus if you're a brother like this. It's going to be on your mind. You have the equipment, whether it be for man on man, up, down, down, up, just as the right hand rule. Probably going to want to stick it in a rabbit at some point in time. Up, down is going to be, well, maybe you buy, and maybe you extreme buy. You're a little bit prejudiced towards the man side of it, but it is what it is. And of course, this works inverted to those systems. Super critical. It's in every single math. It's in every type of system that you've ever dealt with inside here. And you can prove that by actually saying, well, let's look at the class. Is this the best Zoom class for a 9th grade course? Did I learn something off of this? Does it have the standard model? Let's go to the college classes where you teach the teachers this from a young age at 18 out to the thing where anybody could sit in that class. They still need the basic review of what an introduction is. Have you adjusted your introduction to the 12th grade class? Now, obviously, it's going to or a kindergarten class. It'd be hard for me to do that in here because I'm working with the teachers, not necessarily the students. At the dual diagnosis phase, it would be critical that I get this right instead of explaining, well, let's talk about chemistry as a whole instead of any other defined model in the book. Because any book would be critical. If we're using that book, it would be hard to bring up chemistry unless you're talking about turning water into wine inside of here, or turning oxygen into gold, being Dr. Manhattan and Project Blue Book. Okay? Those are the types of philosophies that's going here. Kids, I would love to tell you they are not exposed to this thing, but as long as they have this with no functions that control that value, it would be critical that I understand that value for the SCP Foundation. There's stuff where they paint it out for kids. All kinds of things. It's marketing. It'd be critical. They're looking for a demographic. They're setting that in. Is it good? Is it bad? Is it indifferent? It takes somebody to register that test. That redshifting, that Lorentz, that Einstein cross, that is fundamental and nowhere near necessary. I don't need to bring up Tom, Dick, Harry, John, Luke, Mary. I don't need to bring up Muhammad. I don't need to bring up Vishnu. I don't need to bring up any of those things. Those would be negatives at this point in time. And as far as this universe outside the window is concerned, other than this person might believe in one of those things, I don't need to bring it up. It's still going to have basic infrastructure costs. It's going to have basic timelines. It's going to have basic trajectories. It's going to have basic Pythagorean theories on Hubble 45s. That you do 2 + 2 = 4. If the student gets that based off the register inside here, it would be +1. If you do it inside the timeline, excuse me. Now, obviously, that's zeros or 1, and it's neutral to a point where that kid might need more work. But I can tell that by a negative. If you choose to do this any other way, then I'll just take anybody, and I'll throw you in any job at any point in time. And there is no definition for Uber. it does get to questions of metaphysiology, you dumb fucksticks over here about 83 on things, because I've been trying to join the military for a long time. I've been trying to go to get the basic infrastructure. I'm not trying to fight a fucking drill sergeant off of this. I'm not trying to fight the chain of command. I'm not saying that what I would do would immediately raise me to be general. I have to run the test. I have to be in there. Try it against other people. See where I position inside of this. What is the result? Therefore the momentum. Therefore the position. Because if the momentum was wrong and I was planning on that move, then my position was actually wrong. And only when those things are congruent in Bernoulli's will this work. And now, where do you teach Bernoulli's? In the Common Core across New York State? Is there even a common hand under those things being the same thing, that my education, regardless from a Class D school or a Class A school, has limitations to the supermassive blue giant or type O stars on a black body radiation based on those things? It's all star. It's all hydrogen combinations of iron and things like that. Here's students. But obviously inside here, A's are going to be beneficial. You can tell that by whether you choose to conduct the cancel culture or the critical theory method or not. It's going to be based in A's and F's. It's just that simple. I can't have people stepping inside here, rewriting the books, fucking up all the timelines on a thing because it's a simple graph. It's to say this system is not working right now. I'm forcing this horse to work. I'm forcing this math statement. I'm forcing this policy. I'm forcing this thing to work when clearly I'm missing somewheres in the math based on the geometry of explaining that in a freaking board meeting somewheres. Or explaining that through rules of order and how we handle this process. That would be the first thing. And obviously, just because these kids aren't in class doesn't mean the parents in the board meeting here don't need to reference this as a class. What's the difference? It's a term. This is a board meeting, so it can't be a classroom. This is freedom to assemble, right to bear arms, call it the First Amendment. Now, these are all wonderful things. These are all wonderful things that had anything to do with religion, had anything to do with chemistry at this point in time. Really, it had anything to do with psychology at this point in time. It's just graph and vector positions. It's just saying, here's the applied model. This is where I think it's going to go. I would like to compare that test, have somebody open to interpretations for changing on these things instead of saying, nope, I did this policy. Nobody's allowed to touch any of it. And therefore, I'm God. That's what that is. I'll put it together. I'll kill anybody I please. Well, this is the nature of the criticality on fascism, capitalism, things when you can't augment the change. That's why we have these time windows. That's why we have engineering. That's why we train kids to have a degree in engineering, because it's much faster than having them learn engineering on the field here. But the truth of the matter is I've seen electrical engineers, people with masters, only make it to stone mill bosses, managers on the floor. That's what the criticality on that is. That is what one of the results in that system could correlate to. Are you in that system? Just because you studied electrical engineering doesn't mean you're going to get that degree. Doesn't mean you're going to get a job. Those things aren't provided for you because nobody's putting up a workforce program. You got the school, kids have to go in there. As far as what it's concerned, though, shit, you could try 8 times in a year to get in. And they're going to tell you, well, you had a FMA on a pot garden, so I know for sure you're basically going to get stoned in there. 100%. I'll discriminate you. I'll cut this off, and I'll make sure that you are never met you, never seen you in your life, never had a chance to grade you, never took a time to test you, and yet it be the common system. But you said that because I had a tattoo on my neck that this guy is going to treat me like a fucking ranger inside here, because obviously they mean the same thing as this patch on Shiny, right? It makes me the devil inside of here. Well, it doesn't seem that way to me, seeing that I've walked around people, I have friends, I have family, so obviously that math doesn't work in the critical nature if we were going to design that math problem in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, 7th grade, college, jobs, time fraud, work fraud, harassment cases, and we could apply any one of those values to be the system. Here in the class, as far as what is concerned, kids got to know algebra. It's just going to be what it is. On certain tests, they do percentageably better. I don't want it to be where they all max out. I want it to be where most of it's going to be a common set of C, because that's about the critical point when they are ready to learn the system. If they already know the answer and they get A's on every test in here, then obviously that is not the best form in the way to teach it or when to teach it, given uncertainty. Heisenberg, Raise your hand who doesn't understand Heisenberg, who doesn't understand Lagrange, who doesn't understand these things. Then maybe you shouldn't be concerned so much about what the cultural thought is on this, but make sure that the vectors are based on the mathematics are pursued are congruent to where this is going. I mean, it's one thing to say with the argument on here, well, obviously if you bring up Jesus' name and some of these things, or Muhammad, or Delis de Mortis, that's one thing. It's one thing to say, hey, we're a classroom of 10th graders in here, let's take on the Senate today. Obviously, those kids don't have the resources, material, or timeline, loyalties inside of the system to properly do the FMA here, and it would be critical. And if you try to go in there, you will get crushed. You'll get crushed by Karen. You'll get crushed by nobody if part of this. It's because you go against the grain based on fucking standard models of physics. You said that the standard model of the Common Core was working fine. Kids were getting educated. We knew when that stopped going in there because of the schools that come on that there's obviously going to be a differential. These kids had the entirety of the course system inside here, so therefore that's what they would learn. If you try to do the same thing in here, things will get compressed. Not only will they get compressed, but they're going to take dominance over certain stats that had common terms inside of them where you would allow a natural stretch out of those things for more processes, different angles of algebra, different variations of trigonometry to come up. Now, they're not always useful in school or out in the real world, but at least you would have had the basic mechanics if you got to a place or decided to go to college or decided that your private business was that value of what trigonometry needs to look like and is that value of what the Pythagorean theorem needs to be. Now, the only reason I would use Pythagorean theorem is because potentially in a high value inside of this situation, most of you have heard of the Pythagorean theorem before. We're trying to determine about what grade they figure out this is. And we haven't talked about one problem yet. Not a history problem, not a math problem, not a complex conjugative concept in English or mathematics, depending that they are in both of those. You know, you just can't keep running around with this verbication garbage you keep putting out inside of, well, it's cancel culture. No, it's an incident. It's a case. It defines the physics inside of there. When things are at 51%, obviously we do not have the momentum in here. Is there a way to adjust this so that way it would be presented? I'm not going to go ahead and redo the rest of this. If there was a criminal right there, that's a fucking math problem. And anybody's statement inside here. Obviously not everybody's, given Sharp's cases and what you will do with those things later down the road. If you isolate them as a criminal and not shoot them in the fucking face, then you have to agree with the system that this is going to have to be done to renormalize this equation so that this function is done. We do that. We do that with time sentences. We do that with punishments. We do that with fines. We do that with this other system that says, hey, if you do this again, we're going to give you it again. That's what the concept was in here. You couldn't fight it. You didn't win it. We have all these cases, except for what point you said, oh, well, cancel culture was going 90 miles an hour down the highway. Obviously, we have common systems. It didn't kill everybody in there, but look at the odds. When you say that there's going to be either an issue of common culture equaling, oh, well, I want this to be 200,000 minor accidents comparatively to the old way of, well, that's 100 major accidents inside of there. Clearly, for 100 major accidents to come off with the statistical analysis, dimensional analysis, and statistics based on this value, that we have court cases in the system of things that exist that we could use as standard models, which would be critical. So if you do not have any of that to bring to the table, I have to fucking ask, what is your college class? What is your kindergarten class going to look like? What is every grade inside of that going to look like? Because that is the spectrum in which you deal with while trying to integrate these problems. Get the fuck out of the way. At least the kids are learning something instead of having 8 different plans to deal with, nor a fucking function in the future. You give some asshole the ability to jump in there and steal it all from you. Do the math.